Good morning. I'm Kenyon McDuffie, at-large council member and chair of the Council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today is Wednesday, March 19th, 2025, and we're convening this hearing in person in room 500 of the John A. Wilson Building and via Zoom. The time is 10:02 a.m., and I'm calling this public hearing to order. Today, the committee will receive testimony on three measures: Bill 26-20, the Historic African American Burial Grounds Preservation Fund Amendment Act of 2025, Bill 26-10, the Spousal Homestead Exemption Amendment Act of 2025, and Bill 26-55, the Nonprofit Solar Tax Exemption Amendment Act of 2025. As a reminder, witnesses will have 3 minutes to provide testimony and should remember, if you're joining via Zoom, to mute your microphone and turn off your cameras when you're not speaking. Additionally, we have several witnesses signed up to testify this morning. As always, the committee invites all witnesses to submit written testimony on the council's hearing management system page. Now, let me check just to make sure we're not joined by any colleagues. No. All right. So we will turn to our first measure, which is Bill 26-20, the Historic African American Burial Grounds Preservation Fund Amendment Act of 2025, which I introduced on January 6, 2025, along with all of my council colleagues. The measure was referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development on January 7th, 2025. This bill would establish the Paul E. Selby Senior Preservation Fund. Monies in the fund would be allocated for the preservation, protection, and maintenance of historic African American cemeteries and burial grounds in the District of Columbia. The legislation is introduced in honor of Paul E. Selby Sr., a distinguished D.C. public servant and leading African American burial grounds preservationist who became the first board-certified African American genealogist and co-founded the African American Historical and Genealogical Society. I'm going to call up our first panel of public witnesses. Dr. Patricia Sloby. Lisa Fager. We have Erica Berg. And Antoinette White Richardson. Good morning to each of you. Thank you for joining me this morning and providing testimony to the committee. We're going to start with Dr. Patricia Sloby. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Look forward to hearing your testimony.
It's not on? Oh,
It's
there
on
we
now.
go. I'll start all over
Okay.
again. Good morning, Councilman McDuffie and members of the Council of the District of Columbia. I am Dr. Patricia Carter Sloby, and I thank you kindly for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of Bill 2620, brought forth in the name of my late husband, Paul Edward Sloby Sr. And naturally, I express strong support for this legislation. As you know, you are coupled to a special person when he takes you on vacation and brings a special camera, notepads, and then walks you through brush and bramble and weeds and vines and flies and bees at a cemetery. He was passionate about preserving cemeteries and burial places and used all that was in his power to help protect those in peaceful sleep from being disturbed. Our historic African-American cemeteries were no exception. Paul, born in Pennsylvania, began his genealogical and historical journey in 1954 through routine efforts to find the roots of the Sloby family after serving in the U.S. Army. He received a law degree and subsequently became the first African-American helicopter pilot in the D.C. Metropolitan Police. and the first board-certified African-American genealogist, and he as well was a co-founder of the Afro-American Historical and Genealogical Society. Paul published nearly 60 books, all written about cemeteries, genealogies, and local histories. He made an exceptional contribution toward the preservation of resting places through groundbreaking research and scholarship. Evident from long past times, cemeteries and burial grounds across this vast country have been segregated by race. More than physical remains are buried in cemeteries. The grave sites also hold the history, the social and demographic significance, as well as genealogical importance of those who left this world. The individual and socially oriented lives of the past and present burial grounds of the district's locale are a historically unique and a vital aspect of the Potomac region. Only 4 intact historic African-American burial grounds remain. They are at risk due to many factors, but especially a lack of sustainable funding for maintenance. They must be preserved and restored and maintained to prevent extinction of these sacred places honoring African-American heritage. Lastly, Paul's undying interest in marble orchards, as he called them, inspired him to fulfill a dream to complete his premier work, Bury Me Deep, which includes the detailed description of the 4 historic African-American burial grounds in Washington, an account that enlightens the public's memory of their historical importance to the singular District of Columbia. Thank you very kindly for listening to me, and I'm so pleased that this legislation would establish Paul E. Sluby Senior Preservation Fund for historic African-American cemeteries or burial grounds. I look forward to its success. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony this morning. Next, good to see you.
Good morning, Chairman McDuffie and members of the committee. My name is Lisa Fager, and I'm the Executive Director of the Black Georgetown Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving the Mount Zion and Female Union Band Society cemeteries, 2 of the oldest burial grounds in Washington, D.C. I want to acknowledge the powerful words just shared by Mrs. Sluby, who spoke about Paul E. Sluby Sr., the nation's first Black certified genealogist and a tireless advocate for preserving Black cemeteries. Naming this fund in his honor is not just fitting, it is necessary. These cemeteries, established in 1808 and 1842 respectively, hold the remains to 8,000 to 10,000 individuals, including free and formerly enslaved Black Washingtonians. They were also stops on the Underground Railroad where freedom seekers hid in the burial holding vault before continuing their journey. Yet today, despite preservation efforts, they remain at risk. Stormwater runoff from the city infrastructure floods the land, eroding the burial grounds, toppling the headstones, and washing away history. In 1975, Judge Oliver Gash ruled against disinterment for redevelopment, calling these cemeteries a monument to evolving free Black culture in the District of Columbia. Nearly 50 years later, they still lack sustained public funding, while Oak Hill Cemetery, which sits adjacent, has received consistent support. Among those buried at Mount Zion is William Custis Costin, a civil rights pioneer who challenged DC's racist Black codes. As a free Black man in the early 19th century, Costin worked for decades as a bank porter, handling millions of dollars, a rare position of trust at the time. His contributions were so significant that former President John Quincy Adams referenced him during congressional debates on Black voting rights, stating, "The late William Costin, though he was not white, was much respected as any man in the district. Now, why should such a man as that be excluded from elected franchise when you admit the vilest individuals of the white race to exercise it?" This is the history we risk losing. Bill 20 Bill B 26-20 would finally establish a dedicated preservation fund, ensuring that cemeteries like Mount Zion and the Female Union Band Society receive the protection they deserve. The fund, named after Paul E. Sluby Sr., will be sustained through city appropriations, grants, and donations, providing long-term care. At a time when Black history is being challenged and erased, passing this bill is a powerful declaration that these cemeteries and the lives they commemorate matter. I urge the committee and the DC Council to pass and fully fund Bill B 2620 to protect these sacred sites. Thank you for your time and consideration.
And thank you so much for your testimony this morning. Next.
Hello, my name is Erica Berg, a DC resident. I've come to testify on behalf of Bill 2620, Historic African American Burial Grounds Preservation Fund Amendment Act of 2025. Several years ago, I began volunteering at Mount Zion and Female Union Band Society cemeteries. When I first stepped onto this sacred ground, I never could have imagined how much my understanding of our nation was about to change. That's where, while fleshing out the genealogy of 3 Pope family members buried at Mount Zion, I learned about their sister, Barbara Pope, a DC teacher who, in 1906, was arrested for refusing to budge from her whites-only seat on a train to Virginia, and ultimately won her court battle, establishing the right of interstate transportation without discrimination based on race. Through Miss Pope, I learned about her father, Alfred Pope, an organizer of the largest escape attempt by enslaved people in U.S. history in 1848. While the 77 brave men, women, and children on the Pearl failed to reach freedom, they helped popularize the abolitionist movement that pressured Congress to abolish the slave trade in Washington, D.C. 2 years later. Alfred Pope, in turn, led me to a living descendant, Ann Chin, founder of the Middle Passage Ceremonies and Port Markers Project and a longtime supporter of the burial grounds. Initially as a researcher and now as board co-chair, I search the East and Gulf Coast and identify yet to be recognized Middle Passage sites of entry and ancestral memory, including Georgetown, where captive Africans were disembarked and enslaved in 1761 and 1770. Those are just a few glimpses into what I've learned from a single family related to the burial grounds. How I view our country and live my life has been transformed by the stories of thousands of enslaved and free Black Americans, including unsung heroes who altered the trajectory of U.S. history. If Congress had received an unwhitewashed education, Donald Trump never would have been elected, would still be working toward liberty and justice for all. Please don't let DC's few surviving African American burial grounds also be lost to erosion and erasure. Out of respect for the ancestors who risked and sacrificed so much for their descendants and our country, and because just imagine how much of what we all missed out on in school, future generations could learn from these treasure troves of untapped, truthful history. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony this morning. Next.
Good morning. Good morning, Councilman Kenya McDuffie and the Committee on Business and Economic Development. My name is Antoinette White Richardson, and I'm currently the president of the Woodlawn Cemetery Perpetual Care Association, who are caretakers of the Woodlawn Cemetery, which is located at 4611 Benning Road Southeast, Washington, D.C. Woodlawn Cemetery is a historic cemetery in the Benning Ridge neighborhood of Washington, D.C. The 22.5-acre cemetery contains approximately 36,000 burials, nearly all of them African Americans. The cemetery was added to the D.C. Inventory of Historic Sites in 1991 and placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1996. My testimony today is not only in full support of Bill 2620, Historic African American Burial Grounds Preservation Fund Amendment Act of 2025, but a cry for helping to preserve an important part of DC Black history. In 1895, Historic Woodlawn was founded, and between May 14th, 1895 and October 7th of 1898, nearly 6,000 sets of remains were transferred from Graceland Cemetery to several mass graves at Woodlawn Cemetery. Woodlawn was an integrated cemetery in that it accepted, and that's important, it accepted burials of both whites and blacks. However, internally, it was segregated, with Caucasians being buried in a whites-only section. The last major transfer occurred from 1939 to 1940, when 139 full and partial sets of remains were relocated to Woodlawn. In all, a dozen mass graves eventually came to exist at Woodlawn Cemetery. Woodlawn Cemetery remained the preeminent cemetery for the city's African Americans in the 1950s. Men of the Reconstruction era, like Senator Blanche K. Bruce, Congressman John Mercer Langston, and John W. Menard, along with Dr. John R. Francis, for whom Francis Junior High School is named after, and Daniel A.P. Murray, who was assistant librarian for the Library of Congress, are all interred at the Woodlawn Cemetery. And I must stick this in, and my grandfather is interred at Woodlawn Cemetery. In 1972, Woodlawn was turned over to the Woodlawn Cemetery Perpetual Care Association with little funds, relying primarily on volunteers for help. The Woodlawn Cemetery Perpetual Care Association has worked for decades to restore and maintain the cemetery. Currently, complete records of the university can only be accessed at Howard University Founders Library in the Moreland Spingarn Collection. And I want to point this out, because I know my time has run out, that in 22, we got an estimate for a professional landscape to straighten out the cemetery, to help us straighten out. The total came to $88,000. It is a costly undertaking, even when you have volunteers and limited donations.
Right.
Okay? Only 2 historical Black cemeteries remain in existence in DC, and not being able to maintain them will be the downfall of their disappearance from our collected history of the city. I want to thank Lisa and Councilmember McDuffie and the late Paul E. Slubie for bringing this issue to the forefront before the city council. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony this morning. I want to thank each of the witnesses for a very important and enlightening testimony this morning. Just a couple of questions for you. Dr. Slubie, again, I want to thank you for being with us today and sharing those special words that you shared with everyone about your late husband. And I want to thank you for letting me name this bill after your late husband. I think about what you testified to, and that you only had a few minutes. And so I wanted to ask, is there anything else you think the committee should keep in mind as we consider this legislation?
Is there anything else you should keep in mind? Always keep in mind preservation, and always keep in mind the fact that these cemeteries must be saved. They cannot go to waste, to ruin. They must be saved.
Appreciate that. One of the witnesses today will testify that according to your husband's research, there were over 100 African-American cemeteries located in Washington, D.C. over the past 150 years. And now I heard 2, I've heard 4, and I'd love to get that clarified to understand exactly how many do exist today. Maybe I'll pose that question to this panel. Either way, it's a very sobering reality in 2025, given the history in the District of Columbia.
It's 4 intact cemeteries, and so they're Mount Zion Cemetery, the Female Union Band Society Cemetery, the Union Burial Ground of Georgetown, and Woodlawn Cemetery are the 4 intact cemeteries. Now, of course, across the city, there are still cemeteries beneath our feet, beneath our buildings, metro stations.
Like Rhode Island Avenue? What was the third one? You said the Female Union
Band and Mount
Society,
Zion, they
Mount
sit
Zion,
adjacent.
And Woodlawn.
Woodlawn. What's the other one now?
Union Burial Ground, that is also in Georgetown.
The Female Union Burial Ground
What,
Society.
yeah,
Union Band Society Cemetery.
Yeah, and then Union burial.
But they're both in Georgetown.
They're all, yeah,
That's
three,
just
the
Mount
three,
Zion.
Three.
in Georgetown, one
And
in
one-
Southeast.
Got it. Woodlawn.
Yes,
Woodlawn.
Woodlawn
Yes.
is the largest
Um,
as well.
Ms. Vega, I had the opportunity to visit, speaking of the Georgetown cemeteries, I had the opportunity to visit Mount Zion and Female Union Band Society cemeteries with you, I believe it was last fall.
Yeah.
The Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development submitted written testimony that they believe the Office of Planning is the more suitable District of Columbia government agency to administer this fund if it were to be passed. Do you have any concerns with that potential arrangement?
Well, my concerns lie with just things that have already happened in the past, like not acknowledging the site. And when the digging happened in 2022 or 2021, when both the federal government and the local government started digging on land that was taken by eminent domain with no archaeologists on site and passing us over as if we didn't matter, that's problem. So I would like, people to acknowledge the land, the importance of it, also the cultural competence of it, because the things that we found were in line with funeral goods of the 19th century. But archaeologists, not from the city, but from the National Park Service, called it trash. And just literally 2 weeks later, the ancestors said, we're not having any of that. And they led us to an article that Erica actually found from 1894 that talked about the very articles we found, artifacts that we found were actually left on the grave.
And when you say digging a few years ago, if you could talk a little bit more about what digging are you referencing?
Yes, so Rock Creek was doing a multi-structural, multi-use trail to help with flooding. And it didn't help, but they dug up land that was previously owned by the cemetery. And there's a federal law called Section 106, where you're supposed to let people know that you're about to do this. And then there's an archaeologist supposed to be on site. None of those things were happening, especially when you knew it was a cemetery. There is a big possibility you would find remains. And so that happened. When I found that out, I shut that down for a good 9 months. And the city and the federal government got it together, and we got an archaeologist on site while they were digging and repaving that land. Now the top of where the cemetery is flooding, and that's city land. So the federal government's worried about their flooding. The city is worried about their flooding at the street, but they're not working together, and hopefully they're working together.
Yeah, it seemed to be like when I was visiting, I don't know if it was after a rain or it may have been drizzling when I was there, but it seemed like it was a period of rain. There was standing water
Yes,
along the street up there.
on the street and inside the cemetery is also standing water. And that is because of the way the infrastructure was designed 100 years ago. They direct the water directly from Q Street into the cemetery, not into Oak Hill, which is beside us, but just into us. And so we've lost so much land that we know less than 10 inches, we will hit something.
Okay. I think this was testimony by Antoinette White Richardson. You mentioned Graceland Cemetery in your testimony, that nearly 6,000 ancestral remains were transferred from Graceland Cemetery to several mass graves at Woodlawn Cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
Where is or was Graceland Cemetery?
Heck and Jamal,
Oh, okay.
okay?
So
Where
in
Heck and Jamal
preparation
is
for
with
that
Graceland.
development, so in preparation for that development,
Mm-hmm,
they moved
mm-hmm,
remains?
mm-hmm,
Got it. I do know Heck and Jamal.
Uh-huh.
I was unfamiliar with Graceland Cemetery.
mm-hmm. And then there's Payne Cemetery. Payne
And-
Cemetery is was right across the street from Woodlawn.
Okay.
And the city developed a junior high school there that's sitting there right now.
Fletcher Johnson?
Fletcher Johnson.
Got it.
And there's an article that you can find in the Post that talks about that it got washed, so some of the bodies were washing down the street.
Fletcher Johnson sits up on a hill.
Yes, yes, but the city came to take that land and build the school, but before then, the bodies were washing out of there downhill,
Wow.
and it's an article in the Post that deals with that some years ago.
Okay. I'll have to look that article up.
It's very interesting.
Well, definitely,
Mhm.
and I really appreciate each of your testimony this morning. Erica Berg, is there anything else you wanted to add to the record? I didn't have a question for you, but I appreciate your testimony and
No,
really
I
doing the
just wish-
research.
Feel, I'm sure Lisa feels this way as well, that we feel the presence of the ancestors in this room.
Mhm.
Thousands, we're talking about, what, 45,000 amongst these burial grounds? So I hope you can feel them as well.
Yeah, you had mentioned in your testimony, I'm trying to find where I made a note, and I'm having trouble finding it, but you had mentioned, you mind submitting your written testimony so we have?
Yeah, I've got it,
Okay.
sure.
Okay, perfect. And then, I think it was 2 years you mentioned in the 18th century. Was it 1710? You said something happened around that time, and I was curious as to what.
Oh, you're talking about the ships. So I found these newspaper articles from 1761 and 1770.
Okay.
You'll be learning more about this in the future, but yes, they were advertisements announcing that in a couple of days, ships would be arriving of captive Africans. And so this hasn't been acknowledged in DC, hasn't been acknowledged in Georgetown, and I'm sure it will come as a surprise to the vast majority of
And you
residents.
said those were articles, advertisements, what were they?
Yes.
Okay, and you've located them?
You want me to include them with my submission?
I would love for you to include
Okay.
them with your submission. That'd be helpful.
Mhm.
Thank each of you for your testimony this morning.
I did want
Sure.
to say one more thing. Like I said, there were hundreds of cemeteries. And the problem is we're down to just a few. I say two because I lump the Georgetown ones together because of where they sit.
I got you.
But the problem is, Columbia Harmony was in Washington before it moved to Maryland to be Harmony Cemetery.
Mhm.
And those are the headstones that they found on the farm, it's not a farmland, this Virginia, I think it's congressman or senator's land, where they saw the headstones that had come out of Columbia Harmony that they used to shore up the land.
All right.
And,
Columbia Harmony was where, just for the record?
oh, wow. Rhode Island, but that, yeah. It's the
It was
metro
on Rhode
one.
Island.
Rhode
But
Island.
way before, yeah, at that time. And they have a large number of significant historical African Americans buried in that were buried in that cemetery.
We should
Mhm.
make that article a part of the record as well. That's what I first learned about
Mhm.
what happened there. Yes,
I
Dr.
was going to
Slooby?
say, in Paul's book here, Bury Me Deep, he has the entire history of all of these cemeteries because this is the most comprehensive work of
Mhm.
all burial places and cemeteries in Washington, DC. And he identifies the problems, the years that they were founded, and which cemeteries merged. And at the Rhode Island Harmony Cemetery, it was an old Harmony, then it was one at Rhode Island. They were disinterred at Rhode Island and moved out to Maryland to the National Harmony Memorial Park. So these stories are all written in here in Paul's work if you need to.
And
you know.
the book still available, Bury Me Deep?
Yes, but it's in the libraries. It's out of print right now. It's sold out. But he has deposited a copy in every one of the libraries here in Washington, DC, as well as around in the city here.
Excellent, excellent. Glad to hear that. And your husband, obviously, learned as he was. I definitely have not had the opportunity yet, but look forward to reading his book, Bury Me Deep. So thank you for your testimony this morning, and thank you for the inventive spirit of African Americans book as well. So
Oh,
thank you for
you're
your work.
more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, each of you. Appreciate the
Mhm.
testimony. Next, Susan Galbraith. Sheldon Ray. Courtney Morris. Pardon me if I mispronounced the name. Mary Belcher. And good morning to each of you. Thank you for joining us here at the committee this morning to provide testimony. We look forward to hearing that testimony. We'll begin from my right and your left.
Good morning, Councilman McDuffie, and good morning, everyone, especially the 4 people who gave their testimony before this group. My name is Susan Galbraith, and I am a proud member of Ward 2. Although I have lived in DC, my family's home since 1965, I never knew about the Female Union Band Society and Mount Zion cemeteries until 2021, when I literally stumbled into it and met the amazing and formidable Lisa Fager, Executive Director of the Black Georgetown Foundation, the organization that oversees the preservation of these adjacent Georgetown cemeteries. One conversation led to another, and I was amazed as I learned about the history of these cemeteries and the people for whom this was a final resting place. When Lisa learned that I was a writer and director of theater, Lisa suggested I tell the story of the people buried there. My partner and I began volunteering at the cemeteries and joined others who were metaphorically digging to find out more about these forgotten stories. I was lucky to chance upon a young composer who happened to be the organist at Mount Zion Church in Georgetown. And we partnered with Lisa's foundation and churches in Georgetown. In 2022, my company, Alliance for New Music Theater, produced what we now call Part 1 of the Black Georgetown Cemeteries Project. We use theater as a vehicle to bring citizens together and tell important, neglected stories, what we say, changing the conversation through the arts. We are now embarking on Part 2, which tells even, I think, a bigger story, and it is linked to DC's early emancipation and the Black Georgetown community, whose leaders leveraged their efforts to see this historic passage enacted. The stories of Black cemeteries everywhere being neglected and paved over is a blot on our nation, and nowhere so much as in our nation's capital, where African Americans and their allies risked so much and led the way to full emancipation. And here also was where African American men first legally voted in Georgetown's Rose Park. We want to produce and continue this story because of the residents, especially the students, who know little to nothing about their history. And the cemeteries are sacred ground. Efforts to preserve, maintain, and record this important chapter in our city's history should be something to unite us all. We must support this Bill 26-20 and the efforts of Lisa Fager and guardians like her to preserve our history and connect us to this city's important ancestors. I want to thank you for hearing me today.
And thank you for joining us to provide your testimony. We really appreciate it. Next, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here. My name's Sheldon Ray. I'm a longtime DC resident. I've been involved with the Mount Zion and Female Union Band Society for quite a few years, originally through Mount Zion Church, where I've volunteered for over 10 years and done fundraising and raising of awareness. I organized cemetery work days involving the Rotary Club of Washington, D.C., the Bethesda Rotary Club, Colonial Dames, and other volunteers over the year for mostly work days. Our 2 Rotary clubs raised funds to purchase and then build a storage shed on the property so that the tools and maintenance supplies and all the junk that was stored in the original burial vault could be moved out of there so that visitors and tourists could actually see inside the vault where escaped slaves hid, as you heard previously, on their way up Rock Creek toward the north. It's possible over the years that I've introduced hundreds of people to this sacred ground. I don't count, but it includes DC Attorney General Brian Schwab, all of his senior staff, numerous people from my church, Georgetown Presbyterian, the oldest white church in DC, and we've partnered with Mount Zion Methodist, the oldest Black church, for a variety of functions. The Emancipation Day events there and Juneteenth days are fabulous. I think we had 200 at one point for the Emancipation Day, that included Brian Schwab and his staff, I believe. I've had many really gratifying moments in the cemetery, and a couple come to mind. There was a local Black woman who had come on a tour, I think last fall, and knew that an ancestor was buried there around 1910, but had never set foot there, of course. And I was able to locate the headstone. I think it was partially hidden under a tree in a gully. And she was just elated. I mean, sorry. I'm sorry. And then one of the first visitors I brought from my Rotary Club was Donnie Shaw, a DC resident whose father was the first Black police sergeant in Washington, DC. And the first thing he said to me is, you know, my children grew up thinking Black Georgetown was a myth, and all I need to do is bring them here. And now we know better. I'm sorry.
No apology necessary. I really appreciate you sharing personal stories and making this record complete. I think it's important for people to hear it. I know it's tough to talk about, but I think it just speaks to why it's so important to tell these stories. So thank you for that testimony. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next.
Hi there, my name is Courtney Morris. I'm here to testify in support of the bill. So Eastern Methodist Cemetery, also known as Ebenezer Cemetery, it was established 1824 and it closed in 1892. This cemetery held over 3,000 persons who were eventually reinterred elsewhere in the city. Mount Pleasant Plains Cemetery, established in 1870 and closed in 1890. This cemetery was destroyed in the 1950s, disturbing over 8,400 burials. Paynes Cemetery, established 1851, closed 1961. While it held over 39,000 persons, only 2,000 of those individuals were relocated to another cemetery prior to the land's development. Columbian Harmony Cemetery, established 1859, closed 1960. 37,000 graves were relocated to Maryland. Due to the size of the cemetery, most of the reinterred were not reburied in coffins and in individual plots, but were reinterred in mass graves. The original headstones and grave markers were not relocated along with the bodies. They may have been sold as scrap, but what we do know is 60 years later, these grave markers would eventually be found supporting and securing the riverbank of a former 19th century Virginia plantation. Graceland Cemetery, established 1871 and closed in 1894. The cemetery held approximately 5,700 interments the year prior to its closing. A majority of its burials were reinterred in Woodlawn. By 1880, the District of Columbia was home to at least 21 Black cemeteries. In addition to the 5 cemeteries I listed above, DC has lost at least 12 more. That is more than 80% of those Black cemeteries are gone. This leaves us with only 4 remaining today: Mount Zion, Female Union Band Society, Union Burial Ground of Georgetown, and Woodlawn. The historic Black cemetery is as old as the United States itself. These cemeteries largely originated from Black mutual aid societies and developed in the wake of the American Revolution. While these societies provided various services to communities, oh, I guess my time is up, so I will just skip to the end. Pardon?
Have some of mine.
I don't know if I can do
I'll
that.
let you summarize the rest of it.
So I guess my main point is, these cemeteries honestly hold more than human remains and individual legacies. They serve as memorials to the Black organizations that founded them and as testaments to the character of Black Washington, D.C. The decision made on Bill 2620 will ultimately determine whether the number of Black historic cemeteries in the district remains at 4 or whether it drops to 0.
I
Thank
appreciate
you.
making that point. Thank you for your testimony. Next.
Hi, good morning. My name is Mary Belcher, and I strongly support the proposed legislation. I've been part of the Walter Pierce Park Archaeology Project since it began in 2005. And we're a grassroots group of descendants, anthropologists, and concerned people who work to protect the Black and very small Quaker cemetery at Walter Pierce Park in Adams Morgan. The district's Black cemeteries were a product of Black activism. African-American churches, benevolent associations, and others created these places. Mount Pleasant Plains Cemetery at Walter Pierce Park was owned and operated by the Colored Union Benevolent Association from 1870 to 1890. At least 8,428 people were buried there. It became the city's busiest Reconstruction era cemetery, peaking at more than 600 burials a year in the mid-1880s. Most historic Black cemeteries are invisible today due to construction. Even in a city park like Walter Pierce, where Mount Pleasant Plains Cemetery is located, a planned construction project in 2005 threatened to destroy whatever remained of the burial ground. The city wanted to build large gardening terraces, but a group of us who knew the site's history said, could we please have Howard University archaeologists do a non-invasive survey? We had spoken to them upon learning of the construction project. But city officials refused, saying that all the graves had been removed, which just really wasn't true. After a year of public argument, we prevailed. Our scientific leaders were biological anthropologists Mark Mack of Howard University and Rachel Watkins of the University of Pennsylvania, both veterans of the landmark African Burial Ground Project in New York. For 20 years, we've had an on-again, off-again relationship with the city, but now it's on again. Last September, the city installed 9 beautiful signs that list the names, ages, and death years of the 8,428 people laid to rest at Mount Pleasant Plains. This was proposed by the descendants, and we call it the Ancestors Pavilion. It makes the Walter Pierce cemeteries visible again. When words like diversity, race, and even the phrase cultural heritage are being scrubbed from the federal lexicon, our city should do everything it can to lift up our shared values. We can't let our Black history be erased. Chairman McDuffie, I'm very appreciative of your legislation. It means you recognize the gift the city receives from passionate, if somewhat annoying people sometimes. I would stress the complexity of the city grant-making process. If you can make it a little easier for groups. Also, if you could broaden the eligibility to include grassroots group like mine, that would be great. And finally, I just want to remind everyone that there are still graves on private land. I would like to see this expanded to protect work done on private land. So we have a website if anybody wants to learn more, walterpierceparkcemeteries.org. And a lot of people listening today might be able to find their ancestors there because we list all 8,428 names.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for the recommendation you make in your testimony. I believe we have your testimony. Anybody who hasn't yet provided the testimony in writing, I would really urge you to do so. We want to make sure we have the most comprehensive record possible. Courtney Morris, I know I cut you short, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to add any aspects of your testimony, which we do have in writing, but if there's any part that you'd like to convey while you're here in person today, I'll give you an opportunity to do so briefly.
Sure. One of the points that I wanted to make was I noticed that I came across the fact that records show that Black churches and mutual aid societies in the district were purchasing plots for their members as early as 1808. And they were paying out several thousands of dollars in death benefits, purchasing burial plots, and taking care of funeral arrangements. I think this is really important because it emphasizes the point that the district's historic Black cemeteries took funding to create. And so to me, it makes sense that it will take funding to adequately preserve. Another thing that I think is interesting when you think about the cemeteries I listed at the top that are we no longer possess, what they have in common is neglect. Right? Disuse and abandonment ultimately made these cemeteries susceptible to destruction. It's critical that we establish the preservation fund. It's the only way to protect our remaining historic Black cemeteries, which the only one that is still active today is Woodlawn. We are super fortunate to have our current stewards of the cemeteries, but it's impossible for them to fully protect these lands and cemeteries without adequate funding and financial assistance. And so I think,
Appreciate
yeah,
that.
I think that's it. Everything else is in writing.
Yeah, and then I wanted to ask Mary Belch, I believe it was you who mentioned the grant process at the end of your testimony. Which agency is the granting agency, and how do you suggest the process be made more efficient?
Which agency should be the granting agency?
Oh, you mean in the bill?
I'm sorry?
I wasn't sure what you were referring to, so I wanted to give you an opportunity.
Oh, I think the Office of Historic Preservation and the Office of Planning is a great steward.
Okay. Mr. Ray, really emotional testimony. I appreciate you being here in person to share it. You mentioned Donnie Shaw in your testimony, and I wasn't sure if it was my friend Donnie Shaw who lives in Ward 5, but I sent him a text message, and he definitely confirmed that it is the Donnie Shaw.
He's some D Donnie, right? There's only one,
Right.
as you know.
Yeah.
But we can always count on Donnie at work days, and he has a great pickup truck that's
Yeah.
extremely useful. And I think there was a work day recently, and a lot of the people, I was away, but a lot of the people I've introduced participate, and it's something I'll do until the day I die.
Well, again, I appreciate the testimony, and Donnie said he couldn't be here today in person, but he plans to provide written testimony as well. So thank you all for the way that you all have coordinated this. When should folks expect part 2? Susan Galbraith? If you could hit turn your microphone on for me.
Apologize. The show was supposed to be produced at Lincoln Theater with busing in DCPS students because they have the day off for DC emancipation, but they don't know why. And so this would have helped that. The money apparently was buried shortly after the election.
Got it.
So we're doing a workshop this April, April 6th and April 16th, DC Emancipation Day at Dumbarton Church. I have posters and cards for anybody.
Okay.
Yes, so yes,
And-
we're doing just a workshop recital of the music.
And I know where Dumbarton Church is. We want to tell folks who are at home listening where Dumbarton is.
It is in Georgetown, just off of Wisconsin in that first block of Dumbarton Street.
Thank you each for your testimony this morning. We really appreciate you adding to the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Denise Wright, Mitchell Lewis are here in person. Don't see either of them. So I will make a call for witnesses who signed up to testify virtually. Marissa Johnson, Frankie Bethea, Brina Clark, Claire Harrison, Caitlin Rice, and Alden Woods are the witnesses who signed up to testify virtually. We see Brina Clark and Claire Harrison, so I'm going to begin with Brina Clark. If you can turn on your video and unmute yourself, you can begin your testimony. You'll have 3 minutes. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman McDuffie and District of Columbia City Council. I'm Brina Clark, and I'm here to speak in favor of Bill 26-20, Historic African American Burial Ground Preservation Fund Amendment Act of 2025. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of those buried in the historic Mount Zion and female Union Band cemeteries, their biological descendants, those of us descended from members of the African American community of Georgetown, and citizens of Washington, D.C., who are concerned with the preservation of its vital and complex history. This is a personal advocacy. I'm the author of 2 novels set in the African American community of Georgetown. My debut novel, River Crossed My Heart, an Oprah Book Club selection in 1999, was written over 25 years ago and is not only set in Georgetown, but contains scenes set in these cemeteries. I recall being inspired not only by the historical importance of the site, but by the fervor with which African American residents pursued documentation of its importance to previous and future generations. Residents and members of the Mount Zion United Methodist Church and the Black Georgetown Foundation have worked diligently to unearth and preserve artifacts, to identify individuals buried there, and to archive records of the African American community of Georgetown. For the historical novelist, or for any writer, access to places that are meaningful, if not sacred, to the people you're writing about, whose lives you are illuminating, is crucial. These cemeteries are the final resting places of people whose humanity was questioned, was denied. Can't we ensure that these places will be maintained, preserved, and held sacred for future generations? I am descendant from people who grew up in Georgetown in the early part of the 20th century. In fact, I've recently learned about an ancestor who was freed under the District of Columbia's Compensated Emancipation Act. Alfred Clark was a boy of 10 when he was freed on April 16th, 1862. His image is now installed in the City Tavern, the last federal-era tavern in D.C., and one of its oldest commercial buildings, because of the efforts of the City Tavern Preservation Foundation. Like many Black Georgetowners, members of my family moved to other Washington neighborhoods after the Old Georgetown Act, Public Law 81-808, was passed in 1950. They took with them a potent sense of community. They never forgot their Georgetown childhoods, though Georgetown sometimes seems to have forgotten them. It is because of these vibrant recollections that I wrote my novels, River Crossed My Heart and Stand the Storm. I ask that you please consider the important legacy these cemeteries represent and vigorously support their preservation. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for making the time to speak and really share that personal story. Ms. Clark, we really appreciate it. I know it's sounded like it was tough for you to get through that, but we appreciate you making the time to add to our record here at the council. So thank you for your time. I'm going to turn next to Claire Harrison, joining us virtually. Good morning to you. You can begin your testimony. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Apologies, I'm on my way into work. I volunteered at the Mount Zion and Female Union Band Society cemeteries for a year and a half. When I first stumbled across it, I thought it wasn't maintained by anyone, and my heart just broke for all the souls laid to rest there without proper care. It's always bothered me that across the fence are the nicely manicured lawns and giant monuments of the Oak Hill Cemetery. I firmly believe that the lives of the enslaved and free Black Americans that lived here deserve to have the same reverence given. It's a beautiful, quiet place, and if you sit still long enough, rabbits play around and birds sing. I'm a spiritual person, and I believe that as I worked to clean up the cemeteries, the souls resting there were and are aware of the people helping to honor their lives. Black history is already erased in countless ways, so I think that at the very least, they should get to keep these spaces. There are already so many personal histories and stories lost from these and other cemeteries like it. How many people are buried here that worked and paid and lived and died for their families and communities but have already been forgotten, and only because of the color of their skin and societal status? We put so much money into so many great causes here in DC, and we have an exceptional amount of history to take care of. I believe that it is imperative that we take care of these cemeteries now so that in 5 or 10 or 50 years, someone will stumble upon them and be amazed at the glimpse they get into the lives of a few of the people our ancestors worked so hard to remove from our shared history. Human beings are among a very few number in the animal kingdom that honor and remember their dead. I think that if the people in these cemeteries were buried with the only resources their friends and families had, then we have a duty to maintain those sacrifices as fellow members of the human family. I also think that it's important to check our priorities. If this was a burial ground for just one of the founding fathers, it would have received the funding needed to maintain it 200 years ago. I don't believe that the hundreds of people buried in these cemeteries are any less important, and that we have the opportunity here to say that while that might not have been what our ancestors believed, it is certainly what we believe and stand for now. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony, Claire Harrison. I really appreciate it, all of it. We have it in writing. That last part was particularly powerful. So thank you to you and to all the witnesses for sharing their stories and adding to our record. Brenda Clark, obviously I said it before, I'll say it again, sharing what is a very personal story. I know it can be tough, but we appreciate your time and you sharing that story and mentioning Alfred Clark. I actually happen to live in a home that my grandparents bought back in 1952. And for many of you here who know the history of the city, it's only 4 years after the Supreme Court ruled in the historic Shelley v. Kramer case in 1948, which prohibited the federal government from enforcing racially restrictive covenants. Well, that home that I still live in today with my wife and my 2 daughters was one of those homes that was included in the racially restrictive covenant for parts of Stronghold in Bloomingdale. And so on my way to school, when I walked from my home to Howard University, every day I would walk past 116 Bryant Street where Heard v. Hodge, where that house was. And so this city has a lot of history, a lot of it for the good, some of it that needs to be shared more widely. And what you all are doing today is helping to share more widely the history that exists in the District of Columbia about some of the burial grounds that have been neglected and some lost, literally, in the history of this country. So I want to thank each of you for your testimony. We have our government testimony to hear David Maloney, the State Historic Preservation Officer, DC Office of Planning. Good morning to you. Thanks for joining me. Before you testify, we're going to swear you in, as we do all of the witnesses who appear before the committee. So if you can raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide to the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much. You can begin your testimony whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair McDuffie, members and staff of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I am David Maloney, State Historic Preservation Officer and Associate Director for Historic Preservation in the DC Office of Planning. I'm pleased to testify on Bill 26-20, the Historic African American Burial Grounds Preservation Fund Amendment Act of 2025. This legislation would establish the Paul E. Sluby Sr. Preservation Fund for the preservation, protection, and maintenance of historic African American cemeteries and burial grounds in the district. We fully support the creation of this fund, but for the reasons I will explain, recommend that it be administered by OP instead of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. OP's Historic Preservation Office works to protect the district's historic heritage by recognizing important sites through historic designation, reviewing proposed work affecting historic properties, and pursuing other activities that promote stewardship and long-range preservation of historic sites. This includes engagement with community partners to bring public attention to significant sites and support for community efforts to preserve and maintain them. As your letter introducing this bill notes, there are only 4 intact historically African-American burial grounds remaining in the district today: the Mount Zion and Female Union Band Society cemeteries in Georgetown, the Union Burial Society of Georgetown Cemetery in Palisades, and Woodlawn Cemetery in Benning Ridge. There are also less intact sites, such as the Mount Pleasant Plains Cemetery at Walter Pierce Park, which has been extensively documented and commemorated thanks to the efforts of community volunteers. 3 of these sacred places are recognized as DC Historic Landmarks, and all are included in OP's Black History Sites website, which records more than 300 sites that highlight the importance of African American history and culture in Washington, D.C. Many African Americans are also buried at Mount Olivet, Glenwood, Holyrood, and other operating cemeteries that are not all recognized as historic landmarks, but these facilities are generally in good condition. OP's Historic Preservation Office has done extensive research to identify and locate dozens of smaller African American burial grounds that have disappeared or been moved since the 19th century. We maintain an informational spreadsheet and GIS database of all known and possible DC burial sites, 319 in all. And I might add that a large percentage of those have been identified as a result of Paul Sluby's work. As a management tool for our staff and researchers, but the precise location of these sites is not included in online GIS maps consistent with federal laws designed to protect them from unauthorized disturbance. We agree with DEMPED that OP should administer this fund and manage the grants awarded from it. Although OP is not equipped to undertake fundraising efforts, we do have extensive knowledge about the district's African American burial grounds and the expertise of our staff archaeologists, historians, and architectural historians to ensure that any grants awarded from this fund are used wisely for the protection and maintenance of these sacred historic sites. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And thank you for your testimony this morning. We really appreciate you providing it. And you mentioned that the Office of Planning maintains an informal spreadsheet and GIS database of all known and possible burial sites. Is this information publicly available? Is that somehow inconsistent with the federal laws that you referenced in your testimony?
I would just say that the information is sensitive, and there are federal laws that do provide specific protocols for what information needs to be kept confidential in government records and what information can be widely shared. I think it's fair to say that we want to continue to look at this issue about how can we balance the need for people to be aware of these cemeteries with the need for protecting them from unauthorized disturbance, frankly,
Right.
that could occur. So they are certainly available to researchers and property owners who are interested in looking for information about their properties or to just do research on these cemeteries. And our staff is certainly willing to help anyone who's interested in this.
I was going to ask, so how is it available? How would a person who, I imagine if you're in a university setting doing some research, you'll know how to navigate and get the information
Correct.
you need. But if it's just a
Right.
member of the public who has an interest or trying to educate a group of students in middle school, how would they know how to navigate to get this information?
Right. Again, the same approach is to call our office, call the archaeologists. I think we can certainly, and especially with the creation of this fund, which we hope happens, this will give us an opportunity to highlight the issue on our website, make it a little bit clearer for people how to get help in this area.
And you are here, and I appreciate you being here to hear testimony of the witnesses. So thank you for that. I think you heard, as I did, witnesses testify that there were once over 100 African-American cemeteries located in the area. I'm curious as to whether or not OP's Historic Preservation Office has compiled a comprehensive inventory of all historic African-American burial grounds in the District of Columbia. I think you mentioned in your testimony 319 in all.
Correct. And that's all cemeteries, not just African-American cemeteries.
Got it. Okay, what about specific to DC though? So you have that information specific to DC?
Yes, I mean, that is in effect our beginnings of a comprehensive inventory. And so that's the information that we have available.
Yeah, I was just trying to clarify. I was talking to staff. So the 319 that you mentioned are all
Cemeteries.
cemeteries in the
Right.
District of Columbia. Does the Office of Historic Preservation within OP know approximately how many historic African-American burial grounds are included in that 319?
I think generally, yes. Some of the listings in that inventory, it's a little unclear. Some of them may or may not have been segregated. So there is additional information certainly that can be garnered through additional research.
Okay. And just, we talked about it a little bit, and you mentioned it in your testimony, but you said in your testimony that the precise location of DC burial sites are not included in online GIS maps to be consistent with federal laws designed to protect them from unauthorized disturbance. And I fully appreciate that. But I want to give you the opportunity just to maybe elaborate on that, specifically around helping my understanding of the federal law and what it's designed to prohibit. And does the federal law specifically prohibit historic burial sites from being included in city maps?
Let me say first, I am not an archaeologist. We have two excellent archaeologists on our staff, and they would be able to give you a better answer.
Okay.
I will say that we are in the process of creating a comprehensive map of historic resources in the district in order to help us with the preparation of DC 2050, the new comprehensive plan.
Okay.
We want to create a comprehensive map showing historic resources the same way the city has a zoning map. You know, every property is zoned.
Mhm.
So this is certainly something that we will discuss very carefully about how can we give information on that map related to cemeteries that gives people an understanding and excites people about the fact that there are many sites out there without either running afoul of the laws or creating an undue hazard that might threaten these sites.
Okay, and just to be clear, I don't believe the Office of Planning currently administers any fund that is intended to provide funding specifically for historic African-American burial grounds. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question. Do we currently have?
Yeah. You currently have a fund
No,
designed to
we do not currently have a fund for
Okay.
that, no.
And just to make sure the record is clear, in your testimony, you said that you fully support the creation of this fund?
Yes, we do.
Okay. But you recommend that it be administered by the Office of Planning rather than the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development?
Yes, correct.
Got it. Okay. All right. I don't think I have any additional questions. I appreciate your testimony and the support for this measure. Anything else you'd like to add to the record before we move on to the next measure?
No, thank you so much, and thank you so much for introducing the bill.
Thank you so much. We're now going to turn to the second measure on our agenda today. That's Bill 26-10, the Spousal Homestead Exemption Amendment Act of 2025. The bill was introduced on January 3rd, 2025 by Councilmember Nadeau, along with Councilmembers White, Bonds, and Henderson, and referred to the committee on January 7th of this year. This bill, if approved, would provide that a surviving spouse or domestic partner of a veteran may claim the Disabled Veterans Homestead Exemption. For those who are unfamiliar with the Disabled Veterans Homestead Exemption, allow me to explain briefly. Effective October 1st, 2022, residential real property owned by a veteran who has been classified by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs as having a total and permanent disability as a result of a service incurred or service aggravated condition, or is paid at the 100% disability rating level as a result of unemployability, is eligible for reduction in assessed value of $445,000, provided that the property must be occupied by the disabled veteran and contain no more than 5 dwelling units, including the unit occupied by the owner. The property must be the principal residence of the disabled veteran. The disabled veteran must have at least 50% ownership of the property as shown by deed. The disabled veteran must be domiciled in the district, and total household income cannot exceed the limit applicable to senior disabled tax relief, currently approximately, I think it's $159,750 for tax year 2025. Receiving properties, or properties receiving the Disabled Veterans Homestead Deduction are not eligible for the Homestead Senior Citizen Disabled Tax Relief or Tax Cap Credit. I'm going to now turn to anybody who is a member of this committee or any other member of the council who has joined us. And I see to my left, Ward 7, Councilmember Wendell Felder. I will now turn to you for a brief opening. Councilmember Felder.
Just want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. Just wanted to listen in. No questions at the moment.
Perfect. Appreciate you being here. I'm going to call up our first panel of public witnesses. Actually, it's one person who I believe has joined us in person. Bonnie Roberts-Burke, who's a member of the Public Policy Committee with the DC Association of Realtors. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us this morning. Look forward to hearing your testimony.
Good morning. Or good afternoon, actually, excuse me, Chair McDuffie. My name is Bonnie Roberts-Burke. I'm a member of the Public Policy Committee of the DC Association of Realtors, that's DCAR. I'm also a long-term resident of Ward 1 and a realtor with Arla Real Estate at Properties here in the District of Columbia in Logan Circle. DCAR is the district's state association of realtors, and it serves as a premier voice of real estate in DC. Our mission is to advocate, protect, and promote the interests of our over 3,000 members and their clients who live and work in every ward of our city. Through our advocacy, we represent real estate professionals, small housing providers, homeowners, and renters. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify. Councilmember McDuffie, I personally want to thank you and Councilmember Nadeau and all of your colleagues for your recent advocacy both on Capitol Hill and at the Wilson Building. Fighting to protect our budget, our democracy, our economy through all the uncertainty that we're currently facing. We watched with particular interest the important roundtable you chaired last week on the district's economy. Please let us know if DCAR can assist you in any way in the future. Today, I'm here to testify in support of B 2610, the Spousal Homestead Exemption Amendment Act of 2025, introduced by Councilmember Nadeau last July. The bill would be a modest expansion of the homestead exemption for veterans. Currently, a disabled veteran can deduct up to $445,000 from the assessed value of their home. For many veterans, that can effectively mean an exemption, totally. Councilmember Nadeau's legislation would ensure that when a veteran passes away, I guess this is our day for talking about cemeteries and what happens after we're no longer living, their surviving spouse or partner currently can continue to, we want to make sure that their surviving spouse or partner can continue to receive the benefit. This common sense change can help ensure that none of our residents will face a potentially catastrophic increase in property taxes or even displacement from the city after losing a loved one. It also recognizes that our commitment to our veterans extends not just to them, but to the families that have supported them as well. I understand the district's facing challenges unlike any that we've ever faced before. Despite that, this small change will make an oversized difference for hundreds of district families potentially at risk of losing their homes. We also know that when I didn't talk fast enough. Can I have one more minute?
You can finish your testimony.
We also know that when this committee originally funded the property tax exemption in fiscal year 2023 with support from Councilmember Robert White, the cost was only a little over $344,000. That was a small price to pay, and this expansion is something we can afford even now. Our members at DCAR meet every day with district residents trying to purchase a home in DC and sometimes trying to sell a home that they can no longer afford to live in. These relationships with our neighbors give us a unique perspective on the value of home ownership and the heartbreak faced by residents who lose their home. That's why DCAR is here today to support this bill. But it's also why you'll be hearing from us in the next few months as you consider the new budget. DCAR will continue to remind the council that your tax policies often make the difference for our neighbors who want to keep their homes and our new neighbors looking to invest in our community. Stable and affordable property and real estate taxes remain the first step to stable and affordable home ownership in the District of Columbia, which should remain our shared goal. Thank you again, Chair McDuffie, for holding this hearing and for your continuing support. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, as long as they're easy.
I don't really have that many questions for you. I am curious, though, whether or not this exemption is something that exists in other markets in the region. Do you know if this is something that veterans can claim or spouses can claim in other parts of our region, Maryland or Virginia?
Say that again, I didn't
Do
understand.
you know if this exemption or benefit is something that can be claimed in Maryland or Virginia?
I would be happy to research that and get right back to you.
Okay. I'm just curious whether or not this puts us in line or not having this already in place for surviving spouses or domestic partners makes us an outlier in the region. So if you could find that out and let us know, I really appreciate
Definitely
that.
will do that by the end of the day.
Right. I imagine, we've heard from some veterans about this and they support it naturally. I'll talk to our government witness next about the executive's position on this. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. I'll talk to the OCFO about this. I imagine there might be a fiscal impact. I think you noted in your testimony that we're having some challenging financial times in the District of Columbia, but I just want to give you another opportunity to convey why this is important for the district to consider, even during some of the tough financial times that we're experiencing.
We want people to be able to stay in their house after a family member has died, after a spouse has died. It's very, very important. It's a terrible time to lose your house.
Yeah, definitely. So again, not a lot of questions for you. If there's any follow-up that you can provide, I'd appreciate getting it so we can supplement the record. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to turn to our government witness. Basil Ficina is Assistant Attorney General, I'm sorry, Assistant General Counsel, let me correct that, within the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. I'm going to swear you in. If you don't mind, stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of law or affirm that the testimony you're about to provide to the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much. And are we still in morning? Good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. You can begin your testimony.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, Chairman McDuffie, members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. My name is Basil Ficina. I am an Assistant General Counsel in the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, and I'm pleased to testify for the OCFO on Bill 26-10, the Spousal Homestead Exemption Amendment Act of 2025. In general, the bill would amend the provisions of DC Code Section 47-850 to extend the existing real property tax homestead deduction allowed for disabled veterans to surviving spouses or domestic partners of such veterans. Under current law, the residents of a veteran who is totally and permanently disabled can qualify for a $445,000 deduction from assessed value for purposes of computing the real property tax imposed on such property. The disabled veteran applies for this benefit through the Mayor's Office of Veterans Affairs, which certifies eligibility for the benefit to the Office of Tax and Revenue. Under current law, this benefit is available only if the veteran owns and occupies the property and it ends when the veteran dies. The bill would permit the residents of the surviving spouse or domestic partner of an eligible veteran to receive this benefit after the veteran's death. The bill, as drafted, contains a number of ambiguities, and a suggested revised draft to address these issues and to provide enhanced clarity and administratability is attached to my testimony. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. This concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you for your testimony. Brevity. I kind of want to dig in, though, to some of the things that you mentioned in your testimony. If I could just find, I've got the version of the bill that you provided to the committee. We appreciate you all doing that. But I'd love to, if you could, just talk through some of the changes that you all suggest. I think you mentioned, yeah, just give you a chance to elaborate on some of the changes that you recommend and why you recommend them.
Okay. Yeah, I can just go through the amended version of the bill that we have, that we've provided. And basically, it's just some clarifying changes that the disabled veteran benefit is in subsection A-2 of the bill. So, we just added that because that's the portion we're amending. Surviving spouse of a deceased veteran. Of course, that limits it to, obviously the veteran has to be deceased, whose real property was either validly receiving the deduction at the time of the veteran's death, and that basically screens out or makes sure that only surviving spouses or partners of veterans who were validly receiving the deduction can qualify for it. Or if the veteran could have qualified but wasn't, that also is available to the surviving spouse.
That's an important clarification.
So absolutely. And then again, in subsection B, we're just clarifying and cleaning up the terminology as to when you add in the term veteran or eligible spouse and the possessives and so forth. And then as far as subsection C, again, that's just cleaning up and clarifying how it is that we test for the eligibility of the surviving spouse or the eligible spouse. And it basically is just designed to make the language a little bit more intelligible and understandable to the folks who'll have to administer this.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. Just wanted to get that on the record. I don't know if you know offhand, but you have a sense of how many disabled veterans are eligible in the District of Columbia? for this deduction?
Well, I think according to the Office of Tax and Revenue, there are about 135 properties that are currently receiving this benefit.
That are receiving it, okay.
So-
And obviously, you wouldn't know this unless you've already done the work, but I suspect you could tell us whether this bill has a fiscal impact.
Yeah, I don't believe the fiscal impact statement is available yet. But
Right.
That's, generally, those are prepared before the committee markup.
No, I understand that, but I imagine you could probably, well, I mean, if you don't want to say it, that's fine. You don't know whether or not there'll be a fiscal impact.
I really couldn't venture
Okay,
into that.
all right. I will leave it there then. I don't have any additional questions. Anything else you'd like to add to the record before I move on to the next measure?
No, sir. No.
All right, thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Don't go too far. I'm sure we'll need you in a
Oh, yeah,
few
I'll be
minutes.
right.
All right, thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. I almost neglected to turn to my colleague, Councilmember Wendell Felder, for a round of questions.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Thank you for being here this morning. I know the chairman of this committee asked if you knew the number of disabled veterans in the district. I'm gonna go a little further and ask, could you speak to the number of spouses who may potentially seek this benefit?
I really couldn't say.
Okay.
I really don't have that information.
Okay. Then I'm pretty sure that then my next question would be, and it's okay if you can't speak to this. Would those spouses who are waiting be able to apply for the exemption and receive any retroactive benefit if this bill is implemented?
Well, I don't know. I think that for administration purposes, we'd prefer that this benefit kick in for tax year 2026 because we've got to set up the system to create the forms, the application process, and there's a bit of administrative work that has to be done in order to stand this system up. So that's.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Councilmember Felder. Appreciate it. Thank you again, Mr. Fashina. All right. We're now going to turn to the third and final measure on our agenda, Bill 26-55, the Nonprofit Solar Tax Exemption Amendment Act of 2025. I introduced the proposed resolution on January 13th, 2005, and it was referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development on January 21st, 2025. Currently under DC Code 47-1005, which deals with property tax exemptions, if a building or a portion thereof or grounds belonging to and actually used by an institution, organization, or other entity exempt from real property taxation is used to secure a rent or income for an activity, the building or a portion thereof or grounds must be assessed and taxed. This bill, if approved, would change that law and provide that the building and grounds belonging to an institution, organization, or other entity exempt from real property taxation not be assessed and taxed where the building or grounds are used for solar energy generation, energy storage, and energy management activities. Importantly, this tax exemption would not permit a nonprofit, school, or other organization or institution exempt from real property taxation to sell any excess power generated by the solar generating facilities, which may include rooftop or ground-mounted solar panels installed on the property. I'm going to turn to my colleague, Ward 7 Councilmember Wendell Felder, to see if he has an opening for this measure.
Mr. Chairman, I do not.
Okay, all right, I'll jump right into calling our first panel of public witnesses. Simon Rodberg is Executive Director of Lee Montessori Public Charter School. Reverend William T. Young, the fourth, is pastor of Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ. and Interfaith Power and Light, Caroline Petty, Corey Ramsden, Vice President, Go Solar Program, Solar United Neighbors. Good morning to each of you. Thanks for joining us in chambers this morning. Look forward to hearing your testimony. We'll begin on my right and your left. You have 3 minutes to testify.
Good morning, Chair McDuffie and members of the committee. My name is Simon Rodberg. I'm a 20-year DC resident, currently in Ward 4, and I'm the Executive Director of Lee Montessori Public Charter Schools, which serve 544 students in pre-K through 6th grade at 2 campuses in Wards 5 and Ward 8. Councilmember Felder, about 50 of our families at our Ward 8 campus are Ward 7 residents. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today about an issue that is directly impacting our school and could have far-reaching consequences for charter schools and other nonprofits across the district. Lee Montessori, like many schools and nonprofit organizations, has embraced solar energy as a way to lower operational costs and contribute to the district's clean energy and sustainability goals. Our East End campus in Ward 8 has solar panels installed on the roof, generating electricity exclusively for the school and helping us offset rising energy costs. Since January 2023, our solar system has saved the school approximately $56,000 in energy expenses, funds that can instead be directed towards student learning, staff salaries, and classroom resources. However, despite being a tax-exempt nonprofit school, for FY24, we have a $34,000 property tax bill from the Office of Tax and Revenue, solely because we have solar panels. That tax burden is expected to double past $60,000 in FY 2025 due to increasing assessments because we have constructed an addition to our building. This is not an isolated issue. It could affect many charter schools and nonprofits across the city that have already installed solar or are considering it in the future. And for Lee Montessori, this $60,000 bill means one fewer teacher we can hire to educate our children. Why is this happening? The previous owner of our property, Eagle Academy PCS, I know, signed a power purchase agreement before the school's tax status was determined. PPAs are a standard financing mechanism that allows nonprofits to install solar without significant upfront costs. However, OTR determined that the PPA constitutes a commercial lease, allocating a portion of our property as taxable, despite the fact that our school building and land are used exclusively for education. This decision sets a dangerous precedent. Hundreds of nonprofit schools, churches, and hospitals across the district have installed solar using similar agreements, and many more are considering it. The OTR ruling has already caused some schools to pause or reconsider their solar plans due to fear of unexpected tax bills. This is a solvable problem. DC already exempts solar systems from property tax, and for-profit businesses that install solar panels do not face a similar tax burden. The unintended consequence of this ruling is that nonprofits are being penalized for adopting clean energy, while for-profit entities are not. Similarly, when a homeowner adds solar to their house's roof through agreements like ours, they do not get additional tax. It doesn't make sense that schools like ours should be the only ones that face this burden. That's why we urge the, thank you. May I have a few more moments, Chairman?
You can summarize.
Great, thank you. We urge the council to clarify the law to clarify that solar panels do not create a property tax liability for nonprofits. Without this kind of clarification, we face a terrible choice: removing the solar panels or cutting $60,000 from our budget, which again is about the equivalent of a first-year teacher. I've been a DC resident for more than 20 years, and I'm proud of DC's record on clean energy. Thank you for considering this legislative fix.
And thank you for your testimony. Robert?
Good morning, Chair McDuffie and members of the committee. I am Reverend William Young, pastor at Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ in Ward 8. I am a resident of Ward 6. Our church installed solar panels onto our nearly 80-year-old church campus in 2018. The congregation was immediately impressed with the way that it saved church expenses. But in recent years, we have come to see them as emblematic of a deeper mission to care for God's creation and to be on the right side of history by making renewable energy a reality in Ward 8. I'm speaking this morning for the 9 of the 80 houses of worship in the district whose buildings are powered by solar panels through power purchase agreements. I invite those here in the chamber today whose houses of worship are powered by PPA Solar to raise your hands if you are here. At Covenant Baptist UCC, our power purchase agreement with the owners of our panels made it possible for our church to go solar at no upfront cost and to purchase solar energy generated by the panels at a discount from what we had been paying for grid energy. We are here because the Office of Tax and Revenue has twice determined that one DC charter school's property is not fully tax exempt due to having PPA solar panels on their roof. They now face between $30,000 and $70,000 of property taxes every year for getting some of their energy through a solar PPA. None of our organizations can afford to jeopardize our exemption from DC property taxes, and none of us could pay tens of thousands of dollars in new taxes without harm to the services we provide to our communities. This OTR decision is a nightmare scenario for any DC nonprofit. And now it has happened, now that it has happened to Lee Montessori, it could happen to any of us unless the council passes this bill. OTR's determination is wrong because it misunderstands how our organizations use PPAs. Power purchase agreement solar isn't a side hustle. It is one of the many ways our congregations fulfill our missions. Arranging to buy solar energy from the owner of the panels on our roof is analogous to paying our Pepco bill to procure the energy that comes into our outlets. Why on earth would the DC government treat this energy procurement for our facilities as somehow putting the roof's square footage to a for-profit use? We're just powering the very buildings where we do our work and doing so in a particularly good way. Today, OTR has merely refused to exempt a portion of the square footage of one school from property taxes, but the specter that, may I continue to summarize?
Yeah,
at
if you could
least?
summarize, sure.
But the specter that PPA contracts could jeopardize the tax-exempt designation of a nonprofit organization, incurring tens of thousands of new tax liability, and that will be enough to spook the whole city and every nonprofit board considering solar going forward. The district and this council have been strong and consistent supporters of solar energy in the district, and we hope that you will do so by passing this bill right away. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. Good morning to you. It's good to see you, Caroline. You can begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Good. Good to see you too. Thank you. And thank you for this opportunity to testify. My name is Caroline Petty. I'm a long-term resident of the District of Columbia, going on 50 years now, and a taxpayer who cares very deeply about the sound and good uses of my taxpayer dollars and revenues for the district in general. In the interest of time, I'm going to jump right into my concerns about this bill as it's currently drafted. And they stem in large part from the fact that I believe it would incentivize tax-exempt entities to lease or allow use of their buildings and grounds to for-profit entities for commercial sales unrelated to the mission of the tax-exempt entities. The bill would do this by allowing tax-exempt properties to continue their tax exemption, even if they allow their buildings or grounds to secure rent or income from activities, in this case, the solar generation and energy activities envisioned, other than that for the original for the purposes of the original tax exemption and why it was granted. Under the existing DC code, a tax-exempt entity who did that would lose its tax exemption. And that, as it's now written under the existing code, that ensures that the tax exemption aids in furthering the property owner's tax-exempt purpose, rather than inuring to the benefit of a private non-tax exempt purpose. I'm concerned about this for a number of reasons. First, without any analysis or planning, at least that I've been able to discern, I think this could have a significant land use effect in the District of Columbia, in a city where land, and I'm less concerned about rooftop solar than I am about ground-based systems. Land is scarce and fast disappearing. There are a huge number of DC properties and grounds that are currently exempt from the real property tax, thousands. Second, as it's now written, I think it's overly broad, ambiguous, expansive, and open-ended. Unlike most other tax exemptions, there are no guardrails, no restrictions, requirements, no requirements to help assure that the District of Columbia actually benefits by affording the tax exemption. I understand that the problem, B26, the problem your bill is aiming to fix is a problem first identified by Lee Montessori Public Charter School. And he described the problem and with the fact that the power purchase agreement, may I summarize?
Yes.
Thanks. And the fact that the power purchase agreement was signed before the school's tax status, and that in turn has led to what everyone would consider a whopping tax bill from the Office of Tax and Revenue. Now, your staff has indicated to me that this is the problem that the bill is attempting to redress. And your staff has also indicated to me that it is not your intent to open the door to commercial sales involving tax-exempt organizations and their properties. So this being the case, I think the bill should be redrafted and much more narrowly drawn to redress Lee Montessori's problem and the specter of the problem potentially facing others, to address that problem in a way that allows them, Lee Montessori and the others, allows them to continue to enjoy the tax-exempt benefit associated with their mission-supporting uses of solar energy without opening the door to widespread commercialization of tax-exempt properties.
And thank you for your testimony this morning. Appreciate it. Go next.
Hello, good morning to everyone. My name is Corey Ramsden. I'm the head of Go Solar programs at Solar United Neighbors. Thank you to Committee Chair McDuffie and to the members of the committee for holding this hearing. I'm here representing Solar United Neighbors. We're a national nonprofit that supports the interests of homeowners, businesses, and nonprofits nationwide. We were founded in DC as a small neighborhood solar co-op in Mount Pleasant and still call DC home with offices in DuPont Circle. I myself am a longtime resident of DC since 1996 in Ward 6, a solar owner myself since 2012, and I'm here in support of Bill 2655. Installing solar under a power purchase agreement is a direct and significant way that nonprofits in the district can lower their electricity costs while at the same time contributing to the city's carbon reduction goals. When you combine our city's strong laws, like our renewable portfolio standard, with a power purchase agreement, you encourage private capital to invest, to own and to operate solar arrays and share those benefits of that investment with the organizations hosting these solar arrays. That's a good thing. We want that kind of investment in DC for solar, and we need these kinds of investments to help achieve our goal of 15% local solar by 2041. We've advised at Solar United Neighbors numerous nonprofits interested in going solar over the years and can say from direct experience that power purchase agreements are a critical financing mechanism. Anyone who's worked with a nonprofit can understand how difficult it is for them to manage finances and some of the risk that they often take in meeting their missions. This type of structure allows an organization to go solar without any upfront investment. Nonprofits who lack those resources to directly own and operate solar rely on this to gain access to those electricity bill savings that were mentioned earlier that come from solar. These bill savings inevitably go towards supporting the mission of those organizations. Allowing PPAs and reducing the uncertainty of this tax issue will directly enable those nonprofits to reduce that risk and that uncertainty they're feeling. If willing nonprofits want to go solar and provide rooftop space for it. In a city where rooftop space is valuable and really hard to come by, let's not stand in their way. We support this simple fix to ensure that those nonprofits don't have to worry about the possibility of their property being taxed unnecessarily when they go solar, regardless of how they choose to finance it. It's hard enough to be a nonprofit. It's hard enough to find rooftops to deploy much needed solar throughout the city. Let's not make it harder. Thank you again for your time and consideration. We really appreciate, as a longtime resident, how much the city supports renewable energy, and we hope and support that continued adoption in the future. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. As you mentioned, the city does support renewable energy, and we've legislated in a way that we want to encourage renewable energy use. In fact, have goals that we need to achieve. In terms of your organization, Corey Ramsden, do you all actually, does your organization work with nonprofits or you utilize the PPAs?
We're not a developer, so we're not actually doing a transaction with nonprofits. We are educators and advocates for solar, so we often find ourselves in the situation of advising and supporting those organizations, and part of that is education about nonprofit PPAs.
Well, if somebody's at home listening, they might be a little confused about some of the language we're using. In fact, I just use the acronym. I usually try to not use acronyms.
Yeah, same.
In these types of areas, but the power purchase agreements, describe briefly what they are.
Power purchase agreement is when another entity that's not the property owner owns and operates a solar array and then provides a cost of electricity for that building host, in this case, nonprofits, to be able to lower their electricity cost. So if they're paying 10 cents for electricity from Pepco, that power purchase agreement might offer it to them at 2 cents or 3 cents or whatever that agreement is. So it's a long-term savings for their operating costs.
Okay. So I'm going to turn to Simon Rodberg and Reverend Young to ask the next question. Do you both have power purchase agreements in place?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Okay. And I guess it's important to maybe ask this question as a follow-up. With respect to the power purchase agreements, do you all have the ability to sell any excess power that's generated from the solar facilities installed on your properties?
In theory, we do, but as a school that needs to air condition itself, heat itself, we get less energy from it. So we have never sold back to the grid and don't anticipate ever doing so.
Okay, so does the power purchase agreement cover the entire cost to power your building?
No, we also pay Pepco as well.
What about you, Pastor?
Yes, we pay Pepco as well.
You pay Pepco as well, okay. But in theory, a power purchase agreement could give the owner of a building, a facility, whether or not it is a nonprofit or for-profit, the ability to sell power back to the grid. In theory.
I would defer back to that side of the table.
The rules that are doing that are not specific to the PPA. They're part of the city's net energy metering agreements that are in place. And that's true for any person, homeowner, business across the city if they own a solar production facility.
Right.
Any excess is going to be credited, and that's not specific to a PPA.
And is there ability for an individual homeowner or organization that has a facility or some grounds to make a profit?
Typically, no. I mean, there's not really any path for them to do that because those systems are really designed to offset electricity usage on the site. The goal is to over the course of a year prevent that system, that host, from having to actually purchase electricity because they're generating it themselves.
Right, and I understand that, but I guess I'm just trying to make sure it's clear for folks. In theory, though, is there a avenue that would allow for a person to make a profit if they put solar on their?
I don't believe so, but I'm actually going to have to not have to answer that just because I'm not familiar with the current version of the net energy metering laws.
Got it. All right. Let me ask a different question then. Just to be cut and dry, I guess the bottom line is And we're not running the clock. We should be running the clock, Daniel, because Daniel, just give me 2 more minutes and then we'll do 7-minute rounds. Have you all made a profit from the solar that's installed in your buildings?
No.
No.
Okay, and I think that's the important part of it. But I do want to acknowledge the concern raised by Caroline Petty that I think would be shared by a lot of residents and taxpayers across the District of Columbia. I said in my opening that while this bill would change the law and provide that people in a situation similar to you all and other nonprofits that provide buildings and grounds used for solar energy generation, that it not be taxed. I was pretty specific in making sure that I stated as well that this tax exemption would not permit a nonprofit, school, or other organization or institution exempt from real property taxation to sell any excess power generated by the solar generating facilities, which may include rooftop or ground-mounted solar panels installed on the property. I think that's important for people to understand, and I'm acknowledging, I think, the sentiment expressed by Caroline Petty. I don't know, I'm gonna give you, for my last minute, just the opportunity to share anything else you'd like to share.
Yeah, if I could comment on that. I think, I mean, both entities here at the table indicated that they are not using their power purchase agreement or their arrangements with the solar companies to make any kind of profit. And I would just point out that while this may not be the direct reason, if they were to do that, they would lose their tax exemption. So that, I mean, I think that's an important point to consider.
Yes.
But the other thing is that I don't, your bill would open the door to the possibility of tax exempt organizations leasing their property to the solar companies and EV and energy, the other things mentioned, leasing and collecting rent and income as a result of opening their properties, whether it's a rooftop or a, 25 acres.
That's not the intention, and I'm not sure if as drafted that it would actually do that, but the person who I will ask
Okay,
is the CFO,
Yeah.
and they're usually
Yeah.
pretty good about
yeah.
like making modifications to bills drafted by the
Good.
council
And
if there are any unintended consequences.
And I'm happy to work, if that's not your intention, I'm happy to work with you on that
Yeah.
as well.
I'll ask Mr. Fashina when he comes up next. I appreciate the concern you're raising. I'm going to turn now to Councilmember Felder for a round.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get more understanding on. No questions, Mr. Chairman.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to turn to our next public witnesses who signed up to testify. We have one more who signed up to testify in person, Nicole Rentz, DC Committee Chair, Chesapeake Solar and Storage. And then we'll follow that with Jessica Pitts, who signed up to testify virtually, if you want to migrate her over. It's good to see you. How are you? Thanks for being here in person. When you're all settled in, you begin your testimony.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman McDuffie and committee staff. My name is Nicole Rentz, and I'm here today as the DC Committee Chair of CHESA, the Chesapeake Solar and Storage Association, speaking in support of this bill. Thank you for introducing it. I'm also a DC resident and an employee of a DC Solar certified business entity headquartered in Ward 5. CHESA is a local affiliate of the Solar Energy Industries Association, represents over 100 member companies in the solar and energy storage industries operating in the district, Maryland, Virginia, and Delaware. Our purpose is to promote mainstream adoption of solar and battery storage throughout the grid in order to realize a stable and affordable grid for all customers. The problem that this bill would address stems from the determination that was discussed by OTR about a year ago that found that Lee Montessori East End, a nonprofit charter school that had installed solar panels on its roof through an agreement that involved a roof lease, had partially voided its property tax exempt status by doing so. The district exempts solar systems from personal property tax, and until last year, it was broadly understood that installing solar did not affect an entity's property taxes. The solar system at issue in the OTR decision was installed via power purchase agreement, which we've been discussing. These are very common agreements used mostly in cases where the building owner is unable to spend the upfront capital to install the solar system themselves. In such cases, solar installers can step in to finance, install, and maintain the system, while providing the generation to the property owner through a PPA. To ensure that the installer has access to the system, this agreement is paired with a roof lease. Community solar systems, which assign the energy generation of the solar system to offsite, primarily low and moderate income households, also similarly involve a roof lease. These power purchase agreements and community solar are particularly important tools for nonprofits, as these entities are typically not able to spend the upfront capital and have difficulty budgeting for ongoing O&M costs. Over 100 congregations, hospitals, schools, and other tax-exempt entities have installed solar since 2018, when it really began to boom, and almost always through PPAs or community solar involving roof leases. And to Chess's knowledge, their tax-exempt status has never been affected before this decision last year. Now these entities are threatened with tax liability that they've never faced before, and that will almost certainly be greater than the benefits or cost savings from their systems. OTR's decision subjected Lee Montessori East End to property taxes of upwards of $40,000, $50,000 a year going forward. And as I said, that's greater than the benefits from the system. If the law is not clarified and OTR begins to subject these entities to property tax, these building owners will likely have no choice but to remove their systems. And this will significantly harm them as well as the many solar installers that have financed these systems in reliance on their future energy production, potentially causing them to default on payments to lenders who also invested in these systems. The OTR decision is also, I'll summarize. It's also preventing charter schools and nonprofits from installing solar going forward. Many agreements have been on hold. Chess members that operate in the district report over the past year. And we anticipate that if it's not clarified or fixed going forward, it'll unfairly prevent nonprofits and their communities from installing solar while allowing for-profit entities to do so. So thank you for allowing me to present testimony.
And I appreciate your testimony. If you could, I'm not sure if you already did, but if you could submit your testimony in writing, just so we have it for the record.
Yeah, I did.
I don't really, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward bill that I introduced, designed to address what you raised, the concerns that have been raised by the previous panel. But again, acknowledging the concerns that expressed by Caroline Petty, who was on the earlier panel. I don't know, do you read this bill as creating the potential unintended consequence of allowing nonprofits to lease their properties?
I mean, like I said, the PPAs are typically tied to leases as our community solar systems so that the installers have access to maintain the systems. And especially with community solar, there is often lease revenue associated with that. But they're not commercial generating. It's not like they're renting to like a commercial property. It's not the same. Like this is energy generation that is being supported by the district. This is a policy that the district as a whole is looking to support because it benefits district residents, benefits the district's grid, and helps us achieve our climate goals. And this would effectively stop us from being able to do that for nonprofits. I think Ms. Petty's points about language, especially around energy storage and energy management activities, which I think she highlighted as, maybe not being as self-explanatory as solar energy generation and EV charging stations. I think that's reasonable, and there's definitely language I'd be willing to work with you on, and I'm sure DOE would as well. I think they suggested some of those additional changes last year when this came up. So yeah, I think there's ways to address her concern in the language.
Okay, I appreciate it. I don't have any other questions. Anything else you'd like to add to the record?
No, thank you.
Nobody else did? Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
We're going to turn to Jessica Pitts, who is joining us virtually. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us today. We'll hear your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me join virtually. I apologize I couldn't be there in person due to an illness. I'd like to share my perspective on this bill. So I'm speaking here today as the CEO and co-owner of Flywheel Development. We're a DC-based solar installer in CBE. I'm also a Ward 6 district resident, and I'm here in support of the Nonprofit Solar Tax Exemption Amendment Act. My business has a long track record in the district of using solar as a tool to build inclusive prosperity across all wards. Among other positive outcomes, we're perhaps most proud of using solar as a tool to replace aging roofs on buildings owned by naturally affordable communities, nonprofit communities, and others. 99% of our projects benefit low and moderate income residents. In the course of our work, we have had the good fortune to work with many nonprofit groups, including churches and others. I believe the code should be amended to clarify that solar does not put property tax exemptions at risk. Absent such a clarification, I believe these nonprofits would be unfairly disadvantaged compared to for-profit businesses, and the district's efforts to meet its environmental goals would be stifled. Installing solar on for-profit businesses and personal residences do not increase property taxes for the owner. A clear exemption of the sort that we are requesting the council to formalize for solar already exists for an allied green industry, voluntary stormwater compliance installations, which likewise advance the district's environmental goals. The section in the code states that it does not apply to buildings or grounds used to generate stormwater retention credits that are certified. This section of the code specifies that when nonprofits install stormwater infrastructure that generates income through the stormwater retention credit program, the nonprofit continues to receive its property tax exemption. As a district resident and as a business owner, as a tax-paying business owner and resident, I believe this is the right thing to do for stormwater and for solar. The district's stormwater program and solar program are two ways that these organizations can strengthen their ability to serve their members and the community as a whole, while also contributing to the district's policy priorities. For many nonprofits, the very motivation to install solar comes from a desire to simply lower their costs and better serve their mission, the same imperative that led to the creation of tax exemptions for nonprofits in the first place. My company is currently working with several nonprofit organizations which are very interested in installing solar, but the lack of clarity around property tax implications jeopardizes the ability of these projects to move forward. It is my experience that nonprofit organizations are deeply frustrated about the situation. So I appreciate your attention to this matter, and hopefully it can be resolved soon. I hope the council is able to take swift action to remedy this unexpected penalty to nonprofit organizations when they do the right thing by going solar. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Really appreciate it, Jessica Pitts. I believe you have submitted your testimony in writing, so we thank you for doing that. We'll make sure we add it to the record. I don't have any questions for you right now. I will have some questions for our next witness, who is with the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, but I really appreciate your testimony and raising the parts of the code that deal with stormwater management. So thank you. Appreciate the time. We're going to turn next to our government witness, Basil Fashina, who has already been sworn in. I'll just remind you that you're still under oath, and I would look forward to hearing your testimony. Thanks.
Right. Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie, members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. My name is Basil Fashina. I'm an Assistant General Counsel in the Office of the Chief Financial Officer, and I'm pleased to testify for the OCFO on Bill 26-55, the Nonprofit Solar Tax Exemption Amendment Act of 2025. In general, the bill would add a new subsection 3 to DC Official Code 47-1005, providing that buildings and grounds belonging to and used by an institution, organization, or other entity exempt from real property taxation shall not be assessed and taxed where the building or grounds are used for solar energy generation, energy storage, energy management activities that comply with Energy Star guidelines or electric vehicle charging. As a general matter, property that is used for commercial purposes is not entitled to exemption from real property taxation. Under current law, a property would become taxable if it is used by a for-profit entity for these activities, or if the property is used to conduct these activities in a commercial manner. For example, this can occur when the owner of exempt property leases or otherwise allows a for-profit entity to use its property for these activities. The bill would protect property that is exempt from real property tax from losing its exemption because it is used for any of these activities by a for-profit organization or for commercial purposes. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. I do have a question. Our earlier witness who you heard testify, Caroline Petty, expressed concern that the bill as drafted could inadvertently allow a nonprofit business to enter into an agreement with a solar power provider to provide large-scale solar facilities and then sell the energy generated to third parties. Just wanted to get your opinion about that, if you believe the language as written would do that.
Yeah, I think that that would be something the bill would allow. Basically, the way we look at the bill, it basically protects any kind of solar generation or other activities conducted on exempt land from causing that land or building to go taxable. So we would basically view that as fencing off from taxability any solar type use of a property, solar energy related use of a
Is that
property.
currently what is allowed under the code for buildings or grounds used to generate stormwater retention credits?
I believe that the stormwater retention exemption works in a similar way. It basically says that any stormwater retention activities on exempt property don't jeopardize the real property exemption of that.
And what about the section of the code that applies to grounds used as an urban farm?
Yeah.
Would it be similar?
Yeah, that's right, that any private use of exempt property for farming, gardening, that sort of thing, that wouldn't jeopardize the exemption. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Do you have any concerns with the bill as drafted?
I mean, as far as the parameters of the bill, I really don't have an opinion, as that's for the council to decide how broad or narrow to make the bill. I think that as drafted, we can administer it, so.
Okay.
You know.
All right. I mean, we'll have some additional conversations as a committee. And if we think we need to make any tweaks, we'll obviously do so in consultation with your office, and really appreciate the collaboration that you all offer when we are working through these processes, particularly when it relates to our tax policy.
Okay.
So thank you for your testimony. I appreciate the written testimony and you answering the questions. I don't have anything else to ask you at this time, but I imagine we will have some follow-up. Anything else that you'd like to ask the record before we close out?
No, I don't.
Okay. All right, I don't have any additional questions. I want to thank everyone who testified on the measures we heard today on our agenda. As a reminder, those interested in submitting written testimony for the record may do so until 5 p.m. on March 28th, 2025. Submissions should be uploaded via the hearing management system on the council's website at dccouncil.gov. There being no further business before the committee, this marks the end of today's public hearing. The time is now 12:10 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.